Welcome to Letters from Norway, offering an American perspective from Oslo, with your host, Nick Cameron.
Hello and welcome to Letters from Norway. I'm your host, Nick Cameron, and as always, I'm here with my very beautiful wife. And today we're going to be talking about my podcasting experience and motivations to do this. Okay, so starting the podcast and the blog, how I got into this. Well, there were several factors that inspired me. The first one was Zero Hedge. I started reading that in 2011, and I was really inspired how, Tyler Durden, that's the pseudonym that he uses, and I was also inspired by that to use a pseudonym myself, and how he started spreading the truth in the face of unrelenting mainstream media's political and banking establishment. There's this triad of the media, the politicians, and the banks, and they're just unrelenting, and they're hell-bent on subduing us, but somehow he overcame them. Zero Hedge is more read than MarketWatch.com. It's like one of the top sites out there. I have to put out some stats on their rankings. It's amazing what he has done. I'm very burned out on fake news. I always find myself having to research everything for myself, digging ironically through government statistics. And you find that the government statistics contradict the state of affairs being purported by the government officials. They tell you everything is fine, but then when you dig into the stats, you see that the deficits are rising, the spending is rising, but the incomes are going down, the exports are going down, and it's not a sustainable path, and a day of reckoning is coming. But they keep saying everything is fine, everything is fine. And in fact, I learned a lesson from that. Every time you hear a government official tell you everything is fine and nothing to worry about, start worrying, start buying some gold, start digging that bunker. The bad times are just around that corner. And I also saw a gap in the market, that there was a need for a new point of view, one that's rational, yet upholds national values, recognizes that people must belong to a tribe or a nation, but yet a news show that talks in rational terms about things that can be done, tangible things that can be done, not just bitching and moaning. The far right and the far left have all this bitching and moaning and all these wild proposals. I want to propose some realistic things that could actually be done if we get involved in politics. I'm really into coping with the laws of nature, reality, and history. I studied both engineering and business, so I know all about living within constraints, understanding the value of history and seeing the reality around me for what it is and not living in an idealistic world. So I wanted to share those views. So how I got into podcasting, actually got into the podcasting itself, I was at a party with some friends after the election, and I was articulating my support for Donald Trump, and everyone was like really baffled and wowed that I was making sense, and they were actually agreeing with me, a lot of liberals here in Norway, and they said I should have a podcast. Many people were seeking my opinion and advice, after the election, and I was able to explain and articulate everything very clearly why I voted for him, and they couldn't argue back. I went from blogging to podcasting because I found it difficult to just write everything down. 3,000-4,000 word articles just don't get read. It was just easier to talk. The spoken word is far more powerful than the written one. That's been a truth all through history. And I will discuss that experience a little bit later about getting up and running into podcasts. But first, let's talk about my goals. So I wanted to tell this story from a unique vantage point, being a middle-aged American living in Norway. I was born in 1970, so I went from a home phone to a smartphone in one generation. I went from using a pen and paper and graph paper and a pocket calculator to an iPad and a laptop computer. My life changed very fast. I think anyone born from 1965 to 1975 experienced very rapid changes in life. I want to become a beacon of logic and reason. I want to reconcile the reality of the world we live in against our values. But before I get into the podcasting experience, I want to also talk about the Trump factor and how that inspired me. I saw Donald Trump as someone who finally made Washington more interesting than Hollywood. I had to be a part of this. He was Andrew Jackson in the flesh, coming back from the grave, reviving the spirit of the American frontier. This was badly needed and long overdue to get our identity back. And I have to say, I disagree with Jamie Dimon. I think it feels really great to be an American again. I feel really proud, really happy, and it gives me something from inside. And this is a podcast topic by itself about what this American identity means to me and why it's so important to me. But I'll talk about specifically in brief why I voted for Donald Trump, because this is going to be the subject of many podcasts. I'll just keep this short so we can get back into the podcasting topics. First, I like the America First concept and Steve Bannon's concept of a nation. This was very important that, a tribe or a nation elects people and puts them in power to put their interests ahead of others. We're dealing in a world with massive shortages of resources against growing and growing demands. We have to keep what is ours and take care of ourselves first. Only then, that way, we can take care of the world. If we just start giving everything away, then all will be lost. And I cannot understand why liberals are freaking out over this concept. I mean, I'm kind of insulted because I'm a liberal myself and I consider myself highly educated. And liberals tend to be the better educated and smarter of the two groups in academic senses, in academic concepts like going to university. But yet they can't rationalize this. It really bewilders me. And that's why I had to go on the air and get this out there. I really like that Trump named the H-1B program, the skilled worker visa program in America, is actually a cheap labor program, labor dumping program. I personally, I'm an engineer by profession. I find that H-1B program bad for the engineering profession. It's discouraging young American engineers from getting into the profession because they'll just see their jobs being replaced by people from India and China or, from Eastern Europe. America has to have engineers. That's what our country was built on. Hoover Dam, Erie Canal, all the great American stories, the Mississippi River, lock and dam system. This was all engineering. I mean, America's culture is built around engineering. So we have to protect that profession at all costs. So when you take people, when you go into a profession knowing that you're going to be outsourced or your work is going to be shipped overseas, you ain't going to go into it anymore. We ain't going to have any more thinkers and fixers. We're just going to have people who buy stuff. It's wrong. And I especially have a personal vendetta against the H-1B. I think it cheapens Americans of Indian origin. And I always say I'm an American. I don't even want anything to do with India, but to identify myself, I say I'm an American of Indian origin, not an Indian American. I would never put any word in front of American. I'm just an American, but so you people know who I am, I'm an American of Indian origin. I fought hard for this identity, and I'm going to uphold my society to the best of my ability, even probably beyond my ability. But I'll discuss this identity issue more in a later podcast. I really like that Trump was about draining the swamp. I especially like the concept of term limits, getting rid of the tenure politicians who have lost the connection with their electoral people, the people who put them in power. This is very important to have some competition in Congress to get in there, and you don't get to stay there for your whole life like John McCain does. But there are also points I disagree with Trump, and I'll quickly go through them because these are all podcast topics by themselves. The Trump care, that we need to regulate the food industry. We need some socialism in the food industry. That was a previous podcast. I wrote a story about my views on flag burning. I think we need to allow it. It's free expression. We don't have to like it, but we do have to tolerate it. There's a difference between acceptance and tolerance. If we start limiting flag burning, we're just going to actually weaken our country. I think every time the flag gets burned, in a sense, we get stronger. It brings out people's patriotism, and we know who our internal enemies are. And they do have a right to express themselves. And maybe sometimes their concerns are legitimate. So we can't ban being American, even if it is against America. And I'm also, not very happy about the increase in defense spending. We have to fix all the leaks in the budget process. We have to fix this wasteful culture in Washington. When I was in the Navy, you go out to sea on a ship, and before you come in, the skipper would dump all the fuel overboard and dump as much as he could overboard so he could get that same allocation or more for the next cruise. And it was that way with budgets and shore duty. The staffers would try to spend the money as quick as they could so they could get the same amount of money or more the next year. And they really thought that was right, that was how they were really supposed to run the business. If you ran a private company that way, we'd be bankrupt. So we really need to get that business mentality into the government, that we do things under budget and ahead of schedule before we give them any more money. Okay, now discussing my podcasting experience. As I said, I found it difficult to articulate my views and my thoughts about life, economics, and politics in Norway in writing. And a lot of the articles weren't getting read. So I started investigating how to do a podcast, as usual, going on YouTube. And I found that never pay for advice. Just go trial and error till you find your way to do this. Seek. You'll get a lot of free advice along the way from your fans and from others who know more. So never buy one of those courses or anything. Just kind of just do it. But one of the things when I was investigating this, I saw that there's a shortage of content. We as a society are consuming content so much faster than ever before. It used to be when I was young, you'd go to the movie theater once a week and you'd have to wait for a radio show to come on once a day or a TV show to come on once a week. But now you can get everything on demand. You can watch 2 movies a night, 3 movies a night on Netflix. You can burn through 5 podcasts in a day, essentially 5 radio shows in a day. So the content's getting consumed much faster, offering an opportunity for people who want to get in this business. To start out, so I've learned, the basics of podcasting, and I went and sought a mentor. So I found a guy here in Oslo who is reasonably successful at doing an English language podcast. He was even recognized in the newspapers. But what I find is that, what works for one person may not work for you. You have to kind of be stubborn and stick to your guns. He was sitting there trying to give me all this crazy advice, and it was creating a lot of this analysis paralysis. He was just very over analytical. He didn't really understand the subject matter. He didn't understand the American situation and the American perspective from Norway. And I was getting all these writing assignments. He was like trying to, be like Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid, giving me all these wax on, wax off assignments. Like I had to identify my customer avatar and, name my target customer and figure out his age and what he eats for dinner. It was like a 20-page questionnaire. I was like, this was like a load of crap. I know who listens to my podcasts. It's basically mirror images of myself all over the United States and Europe and Japan and Brazil. I mean, I can look on my stats. I have fans everywhere. And he gave me a lot of crazy rules. It was just too analytical, too rules-based. I think we need more free speech, free-flowing speech like Donald Trump does. Just say what you think and get it out there. And later on, as we were working on this and trying to grow the audience, when we were doing the podcast earlier, he told me he was a growth hacker. Now, this word makes me cringe because I heard this someone else call themselves that before. And everyone who's a growth hacker will tell you this, that they made money on Tesla stock or Apple stock or on gold, that they were there in the beginning and, they rode this wave and now they became a philanthropist. Some of the newer growth hackers say they made their money on Bitcoin. And they're just these benevolent people that want to help other people and by selling their advice, and it's very outrageous advice because when you look at it, I've taken a look at some of this growth hacking stuff. I didn't pay for it. I managed to figure out how to get it for free. Is that they charge outrageous sums of money to move a mouse around, copying and pasting links into social media. So they'll copy your blog post into like 10 different Facebook conversations so that you get traffic. Okay, I mean, anyone can do this. You can have someone in jail do this. You don't need to pay someone $75 an hour. When you put $75 an hour in perspective, that's like the wage that a young doctor gets coming right out of med school and working in a small town in Kansas, like a general practitioner right out of UMKC. Going to Lawrence, Kansas, or going to Topeka, and starting out as that they went to med school. It's like 12 years of school. They're saving lives. They're delivering babies, and these people are moving a mouse around, charging the same amount of money. So if you ever see anyone tell you they're a growth hacker, really what they're telling you is that they're either a gypsy or a snake oil salesman. So after that experience, working with those people, these quote unquote professionals, my wife and I decided to just go it alone. We developed a show formula that we would just release once a week, have one really good podcast a week, make sure we really have something to say. No need for 3 times per week. We're actually having better numbers now on 1 podcast per week than 3 per week. And we just work within our limits. We're very realistically about what we can do. I have a job, I have a small IT company and I need to do that. I can't podcast every day or my business will go down. So we really make it one good one. And in the end, I found I could do a better job myself. Passion of the subject matter overcame any lack of experience or expertise in sound quality and editing and, show production, all of this Hollywood stuff, just believing in what you're speaking can overcome all of that. And I will refer you to my show notes about the technical setup. But in short, I'm using WordPress as my web host. I'm using Blueberry as my media host. Now note that Blueberry is an all-American media host. Libsyn is Chinese. SoundCloud, I think, doesn't let you keep your intellectual property. I use a very simple microphone I bought on Amazon called an ATR 2200 USB microphone. It's an Audio-Technica. It's like $35, $40. It ain't big money. And I work with a sound editor I found on Fiverr. He's an American guy named Matt, and he has a lot of enthusiasm for what we do, and he does an excellent job. Now, moving on for the need for sponsorship. All right, so the need for funding and sponsorship. As you can see in the show notes, we're having pretty dramatic growth. At the time of recording on July 16th, we had already matched the previous month's numbers, putting us on track for a double. But let's see what happens at the time of release. I'll update the show notes accordingly. Right now, this is pretty tough to ask, but, we're looking for money to cover production costs, distribution, and marketing. Each production takes around 6 to 8 hours to research, record, edit, and produce the show notes. We would like to reach a wider audience, which requires advertising and distribution. The advertising would be like Google ads and Facebook ads, targeting the right people. And there are other distribution channels through Blueberry, but they come at a premium, and that would get us on SoundCloud, Alexa, and Xbox, among others, but not in a way that we still retain the intellectual property rights. We are also seeking guest interviews with others in the same space, who would, we can have some better conversations. So if you are a podcaster or a, famous YouTuber or something, we'd love to be on your show. But specifically, I'll just put this in perspective. We're looking at, $10 a month on Patreon, roughly $2.50 a week or 50 cents per business day. If 100 people could do this, this would really help us boost this show and get it out there. We would be overly grateful. But we're also asking that if you're a billionaire or something, please don't give us any more than $100 a month. We don't want to be obligated to any one single person. I want to keep my message raw, honest, and original. So to wrap up this podcast, I have to say that we really enjoy this. And in the future, we're going to be doing more of those don't go there topics, talking about things that no one's supposed to talk about, especially here in Scandinavia. It's really fun to talk about that stuff, because you're not supposed to. And then now to close off, I would like to thank everyone for their support and encouragement thus far.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and follow us on social media.